This is such an important topic, and I feel so blessed to have the three panelists here with us today. And if I think about the topic itself, this is not a topic that only applies to Silicon Valley. It applies to every single parent who have their kids enrolled in school anywhere in the world. So everybody's going through a very difficult time here. So the backdrop of today's discussion is a little bit about my story. So I'm a husband to my lovely wife, Joy, and I'm father of two pre-teen kids. I have a 12-year-old girl, Jiho, and a 10-year-old boy, Teo. They were born with smartphones and tablets in the family. So they were they grew up with those technologies or seeing the technology used by their parents. And I'm a born again Christian, and church is important. The church family is definitely important, but it's not the church attendance itself, but also living out the faith. And faith for my kids is absolutely important for us in the family. So it's an important aspect. I work in tech, but I also understand the downsides of tech, tech addiction, social media, and pornography, and all the negative impacts of that. But at the same time, I don't want to be a Luddite. I don't want my kids to completely cut away from technology and disconnect and just go back to the old school, just paper and pencil, that's it, nothing else. That's not how I want to raise my kids. I want to raise my kids and let them know and understand technology and use it for the kingdom of God. So that's how I want them to grow up. But after COVID, technology became such an essential part of our lives. It's not just for entertainment. It's part of our learning. It's part of our social life. It's part of almost every single thing. So now it became so much harder to have the boundaries. And as a parent, I know I have to be a good role model, but it became so much harder to role model in front of my kids. Both of us are working, and I'm juggling between my startup and teaching, and I am either outside or in front of my computer. So it's really hard to become a good role model in the use of technology as we are all sheltering in place. And working from home itself is hard. And I know everybody today is probably going through a version of that. And it's not just hard because we are working from home, but physically we are here, but mentally we have to be really connected to the people that we're talking to over the screen. So mentally I have to be intentionally disconnected with other family members in the family. Even though when I'm physically home. So I think that's a big challenge that I observe in my family. And I find myself working in odd hours and also working in the weekends. So it is a very difficult time to be a good role model when technology became so much essential in the last 6 months. So several days ago, I had this question in my mind. Are we raising our kids to rely on God? Or are we raising our kids to rely on technology? So that was the genesis of this panel discussion. So today we have three amazing panelists, and I think we have a good balance between a family perspective from marriage family therapists and from a school's perspective, how the school's responding and the role of school or the changing role of school, and also from the church perspective as well. So I think today we have a good audience, and on behalf of the parents in the audience, I feel honored and privileged to ask these questions. But if you have any questions as we're having the discussion, feel free to have them come up on chat. So towards the end, I will gather them and ask the questions on your behalf. And at the same time, I have created a Google Sheet to gather resources for any of the tools and technology that can help us raise our children in this difficult world of balancing technology and faith. So please if you know any resources or tools, please feel free to share them on this Google Sheet. So with that, let me start off the panel discussion with the introduction of the panelists. So the question will be 3 parts. What do you do, and what do you love about your work, and which church do you attend? So with those 3 questions, I'll start off with Christy. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Christy Young. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I'm also a church planter. My husband and a pastor's wife. We planted 2 churches in 21 years of our marriage. We have 4 kids, 20, 18, almost 16 and 12-year-olds. And what I love about my work, I love seeing people be healed by the power of the gospel in the church and in the counseling setting. So my favorite kind of therapy is to really have people be set free in seeing how God has intended for them to thrive, and it gives them freedom. And that's what I love, and I attend Revive Presbyterian Church right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. Brian, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. My name is Brian Kim. I'm married to Ruthie Kim. We just had our 14-year anniversary yesterday, so that was really exciting. Yeah, thank you. We have 2 boys. I have a 10-year-old, almost 11, and then a 6-year-old. They're very energetic and very much like young boys you would expect. They are very, very enthusiastic and love life and love to be active. I work for Reality San Francisco Church. My role is as a parent and family support coordinator. It's a long title, but essentially I come alongside parents and families. And what I love about that is the growth, literal growth in having babies and seeing them get developed so fast within months. You know, if you remember ever having kids, you know, it's like they change very quickly. And at some point it slows down, but it really doesn't. You know, internally they're still going really fast. So just tracking that is super fun for me. There's kids I've known like in the womb, you know, and now they're 7 years old, and I'm like, I knew you. You know, I can pull that with a lot of different families and a lot of different kids, and that's super fun. And I just love to.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for joining.
See them fall in love with Jesus. I think that's back to me, and like with their whole heart, because that's so sorry, but that's kind of long. But yeah, so that's what I love about my work, and that's my church.
Thank you, Brian, for joining. I think you were cutting off a little bit, but thank you for introducing yourself. Stephen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Damon. My name is Stephen Terode. I am an academic and college guidance counselor at Valley Christian High School. I've been associated with Valley Christian for almost 20 years. Really started as a children's pastor back in 1999. Came to Valley Christian in 2001 as a teacher of photography and art, and loved education. I got my master's in education and continuing my education now. I have 3 kids. I have 2 grandkids because my oldest is now starting to have her own. And so I'm a grandfather. It's still hard to say, even after I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, but I don't like to think that I'm that old, but I am. So anyway, that's, I think what I love is learning from them, honestly, spending time with my family. I was going to say fishing, but I thought, well, I should probably keep it professional and say something about my profession. But I do learn a lot from my own children, my grandchildren, watching them grow. And so I like to kind of weave in those stories of firsthand knowledge of things that I've gone through as a grandfather and father into the work that I do. So I think that, as we all know, those stories give a little credit to what we do, and I enjoy having those stories to tell. So love my job, love working with high school students. I primarily spend most of my time with 9th grade freshman students transitioning from junior high to high school. That's my favorite age group.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome. So let's do a quick reality check. So let's hear from the 3 of the panelists. So first, starting off with Christy, from your therapy practice, what are your observations? How are the families doing in this pandemic? Are they having a harder time? Are they enjoying the family time? What's your objective reality check there?
I would say right now, families are having a difficult time. I'm getting a lot of calls. I'm actually just at my limit of seeing clients because I think marriages are in trouble and families are in trouble. And part of that is I think we don't know how to get to know people. I'm glad that there's this Faith and Tech meetup because I think we're so stuck on a screen, we're that we don't know how to relate or read the family. And then here we are now stuck in a place and we're constantly bumping into each other. We don't have a chance to kind of get away from each other. So intimacy is getting really messy right now. And so I think I've seen some good family time come out of this. I've seen parents getting to know their teenagers more, but I've also seen families suffering, like imploding, marriages falling apart, and so I think this is a very difficult time for families and marriages and kids too. I think anxiety in children and teenagers are skyrocketing because they can't get away from, so there's two kinds of stresses. I'm sorry. There's good stress, bad stress. The good stress is the friends and all that. They're not getting any of the good stress. They're getting the bad stress from the school, from the parents. They can't get away from the parents, So I think it's been a hard, difficult time for many, many people.
Thank you, Christy. Now from the church perspective, Brian, how are the families doing? So before that, Reality SF, did the church go completely online, or is it hybrid? Where are you standing in terms of the actual meeting, actual service?
Yeah, we're a fairly big church, so we went completely online, have maintained that, and we made the call recently to just throughout the year we're just going to stay virtual. We don't want to put anyone at risk, and that's one of the big things for us as a big community. There's a lot of diverse opinions too about what safety looks like. And so we just made the call that we're not going to gather. And so we've gone virtual total. And in terms of how our families are doing, I agree with Christy. It's hard. Early on, when I talked to parents, when we started to quarantine and go shelter in place, there was a lot of shame with a lot of parents because they were trying to parent full time. They couldn't, have their kids in school anymore, couldn't send them to daycare, couldn't even have them go to the playground for an hour. Playgrounds were closed, and they still are in our city at least. So there's a lot of shame because some felt shame, like I can't give 100% to my work anymore, right? So they felt bad. I remember talking to one dad who had to pull back completely. He had 3 children under 6, 3 boys. And so you could imagine the dynamics in the household. There's just chaos everywhere. And he was trying to be a good employee, like went and did a project, he did it. And then his coworker pings him and he goes, "Hey, I just did that," and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Like he messed up the other person's work. It was just his headspace, right? He just forgot, didn't realize, and he felt so much guilt and shame. And then he felt guilty when he is working because his kids are running around. His wife's like, "Where are you? Can you help?" But he's trying to work, so there's a lot of like pulling from different tensions. And so that was a big piece of it. And I still ongoing. The way I think about it is a little bit of like, we're all trying to learn how to navigate this world. There's no blueprint. And it's heightened when you have children, right? Because there's no blueprint for them either. So you're trying to figure out as an adult and as a spouse, potentially. And then you're also like, well, how do I also serve my kids and show them what to do? So you're trying to make up a plan as you go. And sometimes that plan changes every 3 weeks, because new health regulations, even our school where my boys go are considering bringing some students back soon. So everything might change again. So I think that's what's really, really hard also for our church families right now is they like want wisdom from somebody and they keep looking to each other and nobody has all the answers. And as humans, we want somebody who has all the answers. We want somebody to just tell us, do X, Y, Z, and you'll be good. And that's just not the case right now. And so that's really hard. We're all trying to figure it out. And I don't have the answers either necessarily. So if that's what you came for, I'm sorry.
Yep. That's why we are here, I think, to find those answers. At least get one step closer to the answer and what the Bible says, and how do we interpret that in this sheltering in place days. I think that's what we are here for. Thank you, Brian. From school's perspective, Stephen, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing as schools are going online? What are you hearing from the students, the parents, the teachers, or the administrators? What's the overall sentiment there in the schools?
Damon, I just want to let the group know that I have all the answers tonight. So just to my colleagues, I'm kidding. That's a joke. Sorry, just had to drop in some levity. I have this magic wand that I keep on my desk. This is actually for a real thing, that when parents and families come to me and say, I need the answers, I wave my magic wand and they realize in that moment that it does nothing. So as you probably guessed, my answer is going to be similar to Brian's and Christie's. We're ending our 4th week now of distance learning, 100% distance. Everyone was scrambling today, as you can imagine, if you guys know what's happening in Santa Clara County, moving from purple to red. You guys that have been watching the news know what that means. That means in about 2 weeks' time, we have to scramble to go from completely online to a hybrid scenario. So all hands on deck, and we're all working late to make that happen. So a lot has to transition. So pray for us. But I think I had a 10th grader say it best a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking with this student. I said, what's changed? What's different? What's wrong with what we're doing? And the student said to me, Mr. Trode, we have lost presence. And it was such a profound word that he used. We can meet and we can talk and we can laugh and we can enjoy each other's time together, but we have lost presence with one another. I'm not in your presence right now. And there's something profound that happens in that moment that we've really lost. And so I think we're just now understanding the measure of that loss from a psychological, physical, emotional standpoint. And we, of course, as counselors are doing our best to manage that. We're academic counselors, we're not therapists. So to my good friend Christy on the panel, we're referring as best we can to folks that are professionals and really can handle the deeper conversation that we are not licensed, I would say, to go forth with. So still looking for prayers from all of you for how we're doing this, and we're just kind of honestly making up as we go along, and with prayer too, right? Let's not discount prayer and the power of prayer and God's presence is in our lives and in our work. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that, and also that profound comment from the 10th grader, presence. Yes, so we are losing presence in many different aspects, in the workplace, in the family, and in every interaction that we do. Presence is something that was really important, but we didn't really notice that until it was taken away. FaithTech is obviously an intersection between faith and technology. So maybe we should start off with the benefits or the positives of what technology has brought us in this sheltering in place. I mean, without Zoom, maybe we won't be able to do this, and even school. And there's a lot of things that is possible through technology. And maybe even 5-10 years ago, we couldn't have we might have not have had the tools that we have right now. So what are some of the benefits or the positive impacts that technology has enabled us during this pandemic? No specific person, anyone
sure,
can.
I'll take a stab. I think, Damon, obviously most of us that are working with technology or have any technology in our hand realize the power of information at our fingertips. And so I think the benefit of having vast volumes of information right in front of us, be it our computer or iPads, and that's great. And students have access to that. It's really turning teachers more into facilitators, really. If you think about it, they're just kind of guiding the process of where to find the information. I'd hate to boil it down to that. I think if a teacher was in the room that right now, they'd be upset at me saying that, but I can't wait to get back to that teacher in the classroom. I think if for any of us that were questioning which is better, which I was, I'll be honest with you, because I was a tech fan and thought the future of education is really in online learning. I have changed my tune. I'll be honest with you. I'm thinking, boy, now I'm realizing the importance of that, what we call brick and mortar in education, and how important that is to the students. So yes, there's information, and we'll talk about the negatives in a minute, but I have access to my whole class right in front of me. I can call a student or Zoom with them. So there's ease of access for meetings like this that I would have one-on-ones with students, and just see how they're doing. That was a lot easier now than it was calling someone out of class and waiting for 30 minutes if a student let them out of class, only to find that they never did make it to my office. And I'd have to wait to call them in the evening at home. And so a day has gone by. And so it's been quicker for me to access my students and get to the nature of their issues.
Yes. What are some other benefits of technology, especially in this sheltering in place?
Well, I think for one, I am so thankful for technology. I'm technologically challenged. You can ask Brian. He was actually in my class. I also teach at Weston Summit. He was in my class, and I didn't know how to even put the wires together, so thanks, Brian. I think he helped me out a couple times. And so I am so thankful for technology in the sense that I wouldn't be able to provide care for my clients right now if it wasn't for technology, right? And thankfully, fortunately, telehealth, technology has allowed therapy to continue, especially during this time of intense anxiety and depression. It's a portal into to provide coping mechanisms. So I'm so thankful for technology. I've noticed in my own children, the four that we have, that it has provided community, especially when in the beginning of March or March, April, when we were really serious, right? Nobody was leaving the house. And, after a while, we have 7 people living in my, I think, 1,500 square foot house, 7 people. And so if you can imagine, nobody had their own space, but technology allowed them to connect with their friends, right? To be able to talk and feel like our college daughter, she felt like she was still in college and she was able to do that. So technology, I feel like, and then now their friendships, right? Community isn't bound by geography, right? Now our community can grow. Like somebody's from London, right? Or she had a picture of London, right? So this community can grow. And I think that's amazing possibilities for the future, for mental health and community, and for church gospel.
Yeah, so even for mental health, there are some positives because we can actually connect when everything is shut down and physically disconnected. So I think there are reasonable positives on the connectivity that we can have with other people. Now let's talk a little bit about the negative impacts, that's more of a specific negative impacts that we are observing and experiencing. What are some of the psychological impacts specifically for online games or extended use of social media? Or are there any studies of online, what the psychological impacts are from online schools? Christy, do you have some information regarding that negative psychological impacts from the use of those specific technologies?
No, I don't think there's any study on the negative impact of online schools yet. I think people are just assuming, but I do have I do have some data on 12 to 15-year-olds who spent more than 6 hours a day on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or other social media were nearly 3 times more likely to have these types of internalizing mental health issues, which would be like anxiety, depression. And so I think that's very important for parents to be aware of, that school doesn't provoke this kind of anxiety. School provokes like performance anxiety. I'm sure Stephen can address that, but all this other social media does impact them, the anxiety and depression that we see in teenagers. And it decreases if they spend less than 30 minutes a day on social media. It's 30. There are 32. Like most majority of the kids spend more than 30 minutes a day. So then their anxiety levels are always going up as they are measuring themselves against their peers.
Does that also apply to, so is it social media, people who post on social media, or people who are just solely viewers of social media? Or are there any differences there?
Just scrolling, just looking at what's out there in social media causes anxiety. And video games, I don't know if you want me to address that. Video games.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, this does apply to parents who are very active on social media too. Your question right there, John. If parents are always on social media, then parents have anxiety as well. And then especially right now in shelter in place, the kids can feed off that anxiety that the parents have from that as well. In video games, when teenagers and children play video games, they actually disconnect from the frontal lobe. That's why they don't see time. They don't recognize how long they are spending in front of a video game. Also, teenagers, their neural pathways are developing. So, and video games are very different. So video games, social media, and Zoom online school is completely different. The stimuli is very different. So social media, it provokes like a certain kind of anxiety and depression because you're constantly comparing yourself. Video games, it actually is a completely different neural pathway in your brain. So what happens is it like starts doing this like dopamine hits on the kids. So it's kind of like a drug, and that's why kids get addicted. And so it's this excitement and disconnect of the frontal lobe. But Zoom and online school does not affect the brain in the same way.
Mm-hmm. So regarding the video game question, this is a question that I had since a long time ago. As a parent, is it helpful to play video games? Is it helpful for the relationship with the kids to play video games with them? I've seen both pros and cons, people who are for and against that behavior. And of course, if I ask my kids, they always want me to play with them. But what is your answer to that?
Are you asking me or everyone, Brian and Stephen too?
Let's let Brian answer some questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm feeling anxiety right now. Performance anxiety.
That's a hard one, I feel like, because, video games can be used as a platform to build a relationship with your kids. Like, you always want to have fun with them and you want to enjoy the things they do. I think like much of this conversation, it has to have its place, and it has to be an appropriate place, right? If it's just free for all on the Xbox for 3-4 hours, 5 hours a day, and you're just like, okay, just do your thing, I would question the health of that, right? Is that well thought and intentional use of the technology you have at your disposal? No judgment on anybody, so just whatever your answer is. Personally, I would say that's probably not, right? Again, if you're playing alongside them, 20, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, once in a while, I see no problem necessarily. You just want to be careful and watch the addiction probably piece that Christy was mentioning. When it starts to become, as believers, we understand this, like idolatrous in their lives, where it's controlling them. I've seen kids who build their social schedules around when they can go play video games. You know, they go, wait, what time is it? Because at 5 o'clock I can go home and do my games. It's like, so I need to get going soon. It's okay, when they start building their like entire life schedule around that, there's a problem, right? And so you just really want to watch the addictive nature of video games, and that dopamine hit thing is real. It does like change the neural structure of their brains. And so think about it that way. Like even as you think about like nutrition for your kids, whatever's going in is kind of what's going to come out and how they're going to develop. So if you're inputting just video games, that's kind of junk food for your brain, to be honest, right? It's straight junk food, like candy. And again, like we let our kids have candy sometimes, right? But again, do you give them candy every meal? Probably not. So I would say think about it that way.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that was really helpful. From a school perspective, Stephen, what is the policy behind the use of phones or devices at the school, and how has that changed during the online school days? Is it still the same, or did it change?
Well, the policy hasn't changed, but the policy really was written for on campus, right? So, and it's really age related. So we're a K-12 institution. So I would say K to 8th grade anyway. It's pretty restrictive. Students are really not allowed to have devices out, or I would say smartphones. When I say devices, I don't include iPads, since we're really what we call a one-to-one school where all students have access to an iPad, which is kind of funny because that's kind of more or less like their textbooks, and it's a tool for education. And we all know that students don't use it just for education. So it does get abused, obviously, on campus. So that has to be managed in some way. As you get up through into 9th through 12th grade, definitely we have less restrictions. There's a little more trust level that students are not going to be using their phones in class, for instance. They'll wait till after class. They can use it out in the quad or out at lunch or something like that to phone a parent or something. So it's a little more realistic that way. So yeah, well, now with our present situation, I feel obviously we've lost all control of that. When a student's at home or wherever they are engaged in their class, they could be on their phone right now. You know, I've completed 3 games of Words with Friends just in this Zoom session alone. I'm just joking, that never happened. But to my point, that those are kind of the distractions that are happening in the Zoom classroom. We use a term around here called Zoom fatigue. I'm sure maybe some of you have used that too, and we're all just kind of like staring at our computers all day long, teachers and administrators, and that just creates a lot of just drained, tiredness in all of our students. So, and so to chime in on that last question real quickly too, I did have a comment. I've talked to students who all of their friends are online in games, right? They will tell me that they don't have friends outside of their games, that's a little scary to me, that they go home because they want to meet with their friends because they're all meeting online to play a game, and that's the only friends they have. And that's when things get really, I think, unhealthy, I would say. So there you go.
So that point was a discussion point or a point of thought for me, because let's say if I don't let them play games, then they don't even have social. So this is their only social outlet. They can't really meet other friends, and through games they're interacting with their friends. So isn't that at least a positive rather than disconnecting from the whole world and just being isolated? That was the one reason why I thought maybe there's a positive angle to it. Although, as Christy mentioned, there's some downsides.
I'm going to use the word balance. Like every day I use the word balance in my office, and because I think it applies to almost every situation in life. And that's a good example of a place where, yes, there's some positive and we know there's negative. And so if there is a plus and minus to something, there's got to be a balance there. And I think as a parent, obviously you need to get out in front of that and have a real good discussion with your kids about what is a meaningful relationship, what is a healthy relationship. Maybe it's not 100% online in a game, right? that's not tough for us to figure out, but might be tougher for our kids to figure out. And so, and then giving them options that are not video game or online related. I think it's, you know, with safety in mind, obviously we have to be very mindful of our local government and state government and what is safe in our present situation with COVID. But I know that there are what we call bubbles, right? Family bubbles, they're friends bubbles, they're all happening. We don't talk about it a lot. But if there is a level of safety with with family, I get together with my family every Friday night and we meet at someone's house. I'm fortunate that 4 of us live in the Bay Area. So we meet at someone's house, we have dinner. We don't have COVID, we don't plan to have it, but we're our only social bubble. We're the only ones that we take our masks off for. So you have to be realistic and balance that too and go, man, I'm so glad I met with my family tonight. We broke bread together and we prayed with one another, and I can go home now and I've achieved some sort of balance in this crazy world that I have. So that's going to look different for everyone. Everyone's has a different level of perhaps safety or fear of what's happening outside the walls of their own home. And so they have to use their best judgment there.
Yes. So speaking of balance, Brian, what have you noticed from the families from the church? What are some of the pluses or minus that you have noticed as the church transitioned online?
Yeah, great question. I think the one plus is there's some level of flexibility and comfort for our parents to be able to sign into church virtually from their living room, to not have to pack up their kids and get in the car. Because that, if you have ever had young children, that can take 30 minutes and might have some screaming and tears involved from adults and children sometimes. So I think that piece of it is really great. Our church in particular does a stream using like a YouTube platform where you can start and even pause it, and then you can just rejoin. So, say, you have a tantrum or a kid really needs help, you can pause it. That has its pluses and minuses, though. Some parents have found it really hard to also engage with the Sunday virtual because they do have the kids running around still, so they do have young children as well. So there's a little bit of both in that camp. But the flexibility is a plus, I think, overall. And the fact that they don't have to commute to get in person, that's a downfall. Of course, you don't get to see people. So that probably is the biggest thing, is that you don't get to actually have that presence that we've been talking about, that interconnection. We're very social beings. We're made to be in community and like to see each other, to smell each other, to hear each other laugh, to see the little wrinkles on each other's face, or, the gray hairs that are developing, over the last few months of stress. Those are the little things that we can't always see on a screen and notice and comment and laugh about. So the social interaction is a really, really huge one. I'm going to do a quick little plug for a book that our staff at our church are starting to read. It's called The Other Half of Church, and it really talks about this, the social connection, and how that is a really important part of how we're designed to be. So yeah, that was called The Other Half of Church. Jim Wilder is one of the authors, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Hendricks, I think, is his last name. But a great read about our brain and just how we have to engage the whole brain to be growing as disciples of Christ. And a lot of, unfortunately, Western Christianity has tended toward being very logical and rational. And right now, especially, we're missing that other part of it, that social piece, that breaking bread, like Stephen was talking about, so important. So I think, to also bring it back to that earlier conversation, anything that we do with tech, the more we can push it towards being relational, the better. If you can just get your kids to like be relational, so even as you were talking, I was thinking, teach your kids to maybe do little voice memos rather than just scrolling Facebook, right? Like, you really want to connect with people, send your friend a voice memo, or send like a short video, record something and be like, hey, just want to say hi, like what you're up to, like I've been doing this, school sucks, it's terrible, my teacher's boring, like just let them rant and rave and send it quickly to their friend, and their friend can just fire one back. So teach them to use certain tech that I think allows them to have some sort of connection rather than just being, like Instagram, they were at the beach the other day, that sucks, I can't go to the beach anymore. It just breeds negativity and comparison rather than actual, oh, what are you up to? Being known, I think, is a great phrase to talk about.
That's a great tip. Wow, that's something that I should also think of. Like, how can we use technology for being more relational with others? That's a great point. So let's move on to more of a practical tips on how we can have more balance between um, technology and discipline. And of course, there's a lot of negative uh, or dangerous things out there, and with technology. And there are a lot of tools too. I shared it on the chat a while ago on some of the tools that can block some of the content there or help us monitor the interactions that the kids might have on social media and so forth. Or it could be just a simple blocker or shutting off the Wi-Fi. The question that I had here is, as much as I can find the tools and find the technology that can monitor that, I want my kids to have self-control and discipline. So if I use technology to control their use of technology, would this be helpful? And is this biblical for raising my kids? So I wanted to have some more wisdom there, going down on a path for monitoring and controlling and having these automatic rules set up. What would be your take on that? Should we do it, or how should we go about setting that up?
I nominate Stephen to answer this question since he knows everything.
Oh yeah, well, let me get my magic wand. Hold on a second. I feel better now. We had a good discussion, actually, a pre-meeting, and Christy, you brought up some good points, so I might steal a couple of them, but I can let you finish.
I'll chime in as well.
Yes. You know, I said something that I've said to my kids when they were younger that I learned from a good friend, and they said, the devil is always busy. And so that was a statement for me as a parent of young children, to understand the fact that there's a world out there that my kids are not prepared for. There's a world out there where Satan wants to get a hold of my kids and get a hook into them, right? And you know, if I have an opportunity at all to use software or technology to increase the safety for my kids, why wouldn't I do it, right? So, I know that it's been a long time since my kids were in the home. Did I mention I was a grandfather? Yes, I'm an old man, but back in the day, when you loaded this type of technology on your computer, everything slowed down. I don't know if that's still the case. Maybe it is. So I couldn't work from home. I couldn't go onto certain sites. My camera wasn't operable. And it was just a mess. So I had to take it off. And then I realized in that moment, now I've left that open for my kids. But there are some things that we can do. Back to the practical. There's some things we can do, like what I did, perhaps. This is just what we did as parents. We insisted that our kids didn't take their devices home or into their rooms at night. It's bedtime, time to go to bed, leave your devices in the kitchen, where we all charged them together. And they couldn't just, be willy-nilly in their rooms doing whatever they wanted to do online. And also, for the most part, we had a family computer, where our kids kind of did their homework and work kind of in the kitchen, kind of living room area, where we could kind of my wife and I could kind of have a look and see what they're up to. Not that we wanted to, be really too deep into their personal life, but our kids understood from an early point. I think you can't spring that on them when they're 13 or 12. It's too late. I think my kids knew, even at 13 and 14, I knew their passwords to their social media accounts. And that's back when, before social media. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't that long ago. It's grown now, right? This before Snapchat, before Instagram, but they knew, what's your password? If it changed, I knew something was wrong. And they knew I was kind of in their business if I needed to be. I didn't use that all the time, but there were times where I'd go, listen, I think it's time for me to check and see what you've been up to. And so, and we're parents. God has given us that right and that duty to raise our children in the way they should be raised. And it's sometimes parents find that difficult because it sets up an adversarial relationship with your children. I think that happens if you wait too long, though, to be honest with you. So start early with some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point.
I agree with you, Stephen. That's exactly what we do. I'm going to add a little bit of clinical part into this, is that just like video games, if you can get addicted and all that stuff, but when kids see a pornographic picture, it actually imprints into their brain in a different way, and it's actually traumatized, and you can't erase it. So why would we want to give the opportunity for our children to be traumatized in that way, right? So with my kids, with our kids, I've always done this, and this is also what I use in therapy, is you will always have my trust, but your trustworthiness is up to you, okay? And so having a phone, having a device is not a right, it's a privilege. And so I own everything. My husband and I, mommy and daddy bought it. It's ours. That means we are lending it to you. And at any time, and so it's mine. Like, just like Stephen said, like it's my phone, it's my device. I set the rules until you can pay because none of the kids pay the bills, right? They don't pay for the phone, they don't pay for the device or the internet. And so you set that up, and that's to protect them, because there's so many things going around. Even this week, I don't know if you guys know, on TikTok, somebody was doing a live suicide post, right? And so it has, like, the devil is always busy, always busy. So then TikTok tried to shut it down, and then it was on Facebook. It was like, just all of these things are around. So we need to be very cautious and careful and protect our kids. And it's very important to do that. And so these external guidelines are very necessary. Mm-hmm. Also, you mentioned something about playing games, and this is what I want to say. When your kids are playing games like that for excessively, I think as parents, this is what I would say as a therapist: why are your kids wanting to escape so badly? What's going on for them? And listen to their conversations. What are they talking about? What are they talking about that they can't talk to you about? What are they wanting to be filled that turning out externally to fill for them, right? And so, as Brian said, and as Stephen has said, we need balance, right? We definitely need balance. But another thing is, we can use technology to disciple. And what I mean by that is, yes, Damon, I think as parents, we should love what our children love. So if they love a game, we should sit next to them. That's what Jesus says, right? He joins us where we are. Mm-hmm. But not just video games, but find out what they're talking about and get to know them and to love them through that. And then my question I would pose to parents is, do you spend that much time discipling them in the way of Jesus as you would sitting down next to them playing video games? Because I think sometimes parents use that as, hey, I spent quality time, we like playing video. Well, do you tell them? Do you teach them? Are you teaching them about Jesus? The ultimate way of life.
Yeah.
So the guidelines, I think, are necessary because there's so many dangers out there. Predators are always out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's not just a matter of, am I going to use this blocker, or am I going to set up this rule, but am I discipling them? Am I loving them in the way that Jesus did? Yeah, I think that's a really good one. Brian, what are some practical tips that you notice or you've observed in your part of your ministry in having a good balance, especially in the family, related to technology? Are there any recommendations or tools and tips that you can recommend?
Yeah, I will first recommend, I added to the document just a few minutes ago, but TechWise Family is a really great book, and they have a great website that can actually walk you through essentially just putting technology in its place. Like I said earlier, it has to have an appropriate place, just like anything else. And this book really helps walk through a family, ask the right questions. So what do you do? Like, what do you want to do with technology? Where do you want it to be? How do you want it to have its place within your family culture and your structure? But the one thing I will say, if you're going to do that, it demands accountability from you as parents too. So unless you're willing to engage in that, I wouldn't pick up the book and take it seriously until you really take this issue seriously yourself. Because then it means you, like you were saying, Damon, to be a role model, have to sort of make those decisions to be like, if we're saying 9 p.m. is like screen's done time, I need to model that. right? If we're saying that dinner time is no screen time, no phone time, I need to model that. I need to put this guy and go like, you're done for now. Some families get extreme. They have like bedtime routines for their tech. They actually like put them in a little place like, we're putting our phones to bed now, like good night, see you tomorrow morning at 8, or whatever time they set. And so it's just healthy to have that conversation with your children, I think, as they get older, especially to know what is this like. So Tech Wise Family is a great book. Other thing that I will say I think is really important is to build trust in your children around tech, right? You can have all the blockers in the world, but like you said, Damon, they're smart kids. They will circumvent, they will do everything. I was talking to a mom a couple months ago, like, teenage kid, he found every way to get around it. And he snuck out of the house at one point and was at the local Starbucks because they had free Wi-Fi. They even shut the Wi-Fi off in the house, So it's like they will find ways to get around it. And, this kid was on for hours, with the iPad because he found it, unlocked it, snuck out of the house, went to Starbucks, And so there's only so much you can do with blockers, and it doesn't really breed trust in your child. So, I would say have some stuff in place where you can definitely like see what your kids are doing and tell them that's important because they're only in control of so much. I think that's a good way to frame the conversation is even as parents, as adults, I can only control so much. There's a lot out there that wants to, harm us, wants to potentially do damage. And so one of the things we can do is safeguard our house. Just like we lock our doors. This is what I just explained to my kids the other day. Lock our doors, keep our windows shut because we don't know. We just want to keep things out that shouldn't be in our house, right? Even if it's like mosquitoes. You don't have to always say it's creepy people, because that could scare some kids, right? Yeah. So you can just even say we keep the bugs out by closing things, locking doors. In the same way we close our internet, we know what's coming in and out. That's all we're doing is just keep an eye on things. And that's why we have certain softwares in place. But really you want to teach your kids how to learn to trust their own selves with tech and breed self-control with them. So again, having boundaries, having clear stuff. I'll try to finish fast, but my son just got his first Chromebook. Big deal. But I was like, I made the settings that you have to approve every website you visit through my Family Link app. So anytime he has to go to a new website, it pops up on my phone, says, oh, he wants to go visit yahoo.com. I'm like, why do you need to go see that? Is that for school? He's like, yep. I'm like, okay, cool. For school. Good to know. So any website he visits, I have to approve. And he's okay with that. He's understood from the very beginning. This is for school. You need to approve with this because we just don't know. So again, building trust with your kids, that's one way to do it. Just have continual conversation with them about what does it mean to have technology? How does it affect you? Why is it important that we learn how to use this? It's not just a free-for-all, and knowing that your kids are just as parents, that you're just looking out for your kids, let them be kids is a really important piece of that, I think, to help them remember, like, you are a child. Sometimes this tech is not for you. Some things are just not for you, just like certain movies, certain drinks. It's just like related to like real life stuff. Like there's a lot of things that aren't for a 12-year-old, and that's just life. And certain things on, websites and certain technologies are not for you either. So normalizing the conversation in that way is like, it's just the same as anything else in this world. You can't drive. Sorry, man, you can't. And so you can't use that phone.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. The tool was called Family Link. Is it what it's called? Family Link. So I can set up my children's computer and approve. Is that called Family Link?
Family Link, it's a Google app. So if they're not using like Chrome or Chromebooks, it might not always work. But if that's the case, I would just say set up your kids on Chrome then and just use it with their Gmail because it links with their Gmail. And so you can kind of see everything. You can even, obviously check their email account. And again, my kids know up front, like this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to make sure I check your email account. I'm going to make sure I check every website that you want to check out. And if he wants to look at something different, I don't want to approve on his, I'll let him use it on mine. But with me kind of supervising, that way there's no like, then I can't access some of the stuff I need. It's, it's like, yeah, you can, but this is how we're going to do it then with my computer, with me nearby.
Thanks, Brian. Now let's go to the questions. There's a lot of questions coming up on chat. So let me go to the top. Let's see. What practical applications could parents apply to get off social? Like walk together or something non-tech?
You know,
What?
our family did what our family did this summer that I've really enjoyed. We read the Bible in 40 days. And we sat there and we read it. And you know what? It only takes about 45 minutes to read about 37 chapters a day, 45 minutes to an hour, which is really not much compared to how much time they were spending on the internet. And then we did the gospel project. We used technology and we watched it together. So we were doing, we were using tech to build our faith, but also we were doing it off the screen. We made them read the Bible not on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, that's
and
a
board
good
games. You could do board games.
Yeah.
Our family, my immediate family, the same ones I meet Friday night, we have a Wednesday evening 30 minutes, a Zoom meeting for everyone. As my kids are up in Oregon, Northern Oregon. So we all get on, if we can, just for 30 minutes, just to connect with one another, live anyway. That's better than social media. And so using technology, I think, in a positive way, in a more real way, I think, than just kind of texting as we normally would do. So it has brought our family closer together. I will say now we've done this since March. I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to meet, and I haven't, I'm ashamed to say I'm not one of those people that call my mom every other day. I probably should, and she's probably going to watch this recording. So Mom, there's a shout out to you. But see her every week, and my dad and my sister and my brother, and we're all on there. And it's like, man, I feel great after I do that. I feel like, wow, it fills me up. And I'm sure it does them too, but that's just one practical way to use Zoom, use technology, get off the phone, and meet synchronously.
Mm-hmm. Great. Here's another question regarding addiction, whether it's addiction to game or addiction to social media, whatever that may be. Is it better to reduce it gradually or quit cold turkey? What are some of the ways that work to get out from addiction?
Well, what has worked in our family, and I shared this on Tuesday at our meeting, was for us, we always use the word, is it controlling you? What reaction are you having? So if our children started, even at a young age, if they got upset, if I said, okay, it's time to get off the DS, then I would say, you're too young. Obviously, you don't have self-control. So this is controlling you. And I think then you can't handle video games. And so we were trying to teach them self-control, to be controlled by God, not by this device. So their reaction, I think, tells you a lot about it, right? And then also, now we're putting the ball in the kids' court. You want this? Then you need to show me that you have self-control. It's not me. Like, we bought these devices for you, but you're not ready. Just like Brian said, there's drinks, you can't drink it because you're like, obviously you can't play this game. If I give you a limit, and you have to be very logical and tell them, I did not buy these devices to torture you. So you just sit there and I say, you can't. I want you to enjoy it. Mommy and Daddy work really hard. But you know what? When you get so upset and you start having tantrums, when I say there's a limit, then this is controlling you. And if anything else controls you, for example, it's not just video games. If it's food or, whatever, right? Like if there's other things, like your friends, like those are not good things for you, period. So you're giving them control. You're also teaching them how to build trust, right?
Yeah. So more about self-control. So giving them the opportunity to practice self-control. So it's not a matter of just taking away or gradual, but having the ability to control themselves. I think that's a really good point. Thanks, Christy.
I will share the Brain Life link with you guys later, and that'll tell you about video game addiction and treatments and what that does to your brain, okay?
Great. One last question from the chat. I think there are a lot of answers here too, so I'm trying to decipher through what the question was not. How do we set boundaries when my child is now 18 plus and going to college, sitting at our due to remote learning dining room table, or if they buy their own tech devices? How do we set boundaries with them when they're old enough and sitting at the dining table if they're on, or if they're on their own devices? How do we set boundaries?
I'll jump in just because I answered that on the chat, but I'd like to expound a little bit. My emphasis was on your children, and the earlier you can start this, the better, should understand your family culture. By that, I mean, like, what do you see as valuable? How do you make decisions? And if you could get that into like their DNA almost really young and help them chip in to like contribute to that, like ask them, what's important to you? Like name some words that you would describe yourself at that are really important for you. My 10-year-old would probably be like having fun. Okay, that's okay to have fun as a value, right? So anything that we're trying to do, any decisions that we make, any vacation we choose, you know, whatever it is, like, let's try to have fun, right? Or something new, trying something new. He loves new things. He is Enneagram 7 a lot of times. And so he loves that. So if you could have your children kind of own your family culture and like help in the development of it, they kind of have to have like a level of like self, like reflection about it. Like, well, is this really who we want to be as a family? And is this who I want to become? If they can understand this idea of formation and why these values are important, that would be a really helpful way to put it. I mean, the hard line you could take with your 18-year-old is like, you live in our house, you live by our rules. I think you want to make an ally of your child, especially at that age though. So if you can get them to own your family culture and like live into it like wholeheartedly and be like, yes, this is who we are as a family. We chose this, right? They can't back away from it. You know, once they have ownership, that's the key piece there. You want to always contribute to it and review it. That way they kind of say like, you can always go back to like, we chose this together. And so we're going to hold each other accountable, right? Do we want to become the kind of people that just, you know, do whatever we want on the internet? No, you know, and you got to steer it carefully. You don't want to be heavy-handed, and you don't want to be, you know, shaming when people like slip up or make a decision that isn't right. But ultimately it comes back to like family culture again. Be like, this is who we are as like Kim family. This is who we chose to be. This is who we're going to be, right? And if I slip up, you can call me out too. Like mutual accountability is awesome. Kids delight in that. They delight in that when you like mistakenly check your text at the table and they're like, what are you doing? You're like, you got me. You got me red-handed. It's cool to actually model that to like your kids then, to be like, that's the appropriate reaction to being called out is like, you're right. I forgot. Sorry. I'll try not to do it again. And then you put it away, right? So modeling all that stuff is actually really healthy for our kids to see that, yeah, we have ideals, we have guidelines. Sometimes we mess up. And then we just go, you know what? You're right. Okay. Sorry. You know, not to just say like, well, forget the guideline, forget it, you know? No, it's still there in place for a reason. And helping your kids understand the reason is that it forms your character and who you become is really helpful, I think, for them.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Christy. And thank you, Stephen, for coming and sharing your wisdom and your experience and all the insights for the parents who are in this room and who will be listening to this on recording. I think this is really helpful. It was really helpful for me, and I hope it was helpful for all the parents in the room and who will be listening to this on this recording.
I guess people will be referring to you now, Christy, but your caseload is full now. What are people going to do?
You know, if people would go to church and go to a really good church and get involved in discipleship and not afraid to hear the truth, I think therapists would be out of a job. I really do. You know? So I hope that happens, that people will go to church more. You get great socialization with peers, for your kids, good mentors, Sunday school teachers. I mean, there's just such a great benefit to that.